I stood at the edge of the pool, staring at the glistening water, my thoughts swirling in confusion. The night was warm, the moon hung in the sky like an indifferent observer to my turmoil. The soft hum of the air conditioning from the nearby resort lounge mingled with the distant laughter of other guests. But none of that mattered. Amanda, my wife of almost 8 years, was in the middle of a kiss. A kiss I should never have witnessed. I didn't want to be there, didn't want to see what I had feared for months. But somehow, the moment I walked past that corner and caught a glimpse of her, I knew. Jason was young. Too young for her. Just under 30, fresh-faced, with an easy, charming grin that everyone liked. I had always been skeptical of their working relationship. The way he'd look at her with that smile, like he was entitled to her attention, the way he'd linger a little too long whenever they met in the office. At first, I chalked it up to my insecurities. But here, watching them, I could no longer deny it. The sound of their lips meeting filled the otherwise quiet night. I could barely breathe as I stood frozen in place, watching the scene unfold in front of me. She didn't even glance over her shoulder, didn't even sense my presence. She was enthralled, lost in his arms as if I didn't even exist. My chest tightened with each second. I wanted to walk away, to spare myself the pain, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I couldn't leave. Jason's hands slid down Amanda's back, pulling her closer, his fingers creeping toward her waist. My mind screamed for her to pull away, to stop, but she didn't. She didn't hesitate. Instead, she leaned into him, her fingers threading through his hair, the kiss deepening, more passionate than I ever remembered her being with me. It felt like a punch to the gut, but the worst part was the sick, gnawing feeling in my stomach. This wasn't just about them. This was about me, my failures, my own doubts. I could hear her voice in my head, the way she'd laugh when I tried to ask if something was wrong. "You're imagining things," she would say. But the truth was I knew. Somewhere deep inside, I knew it was only a matter of time before I would have to confront this betrayal. The pool lights cast ripples on their faces, illuminating their expressions in a way that seemed almost unreal. Jason pulled back for a moment, his eyes locked on hers. Amanda smiled at him. It wasn't a smile I recognized. It wasn't the smile she gave me, the one that was full of comfort, familiarity, and trust. This was different, new, like they shared some secret joke that only they were in on. I watched, almost paralyzed, as she stepped back, taking his hand, leading him away from the pool's edge. I couldn't see what happened next. Too many trees, too much distance, but I didn't need to. The fact that they left together was enough. Enough to confirm everything I had feared. It all started so subtly. A few months ago, I noticed Amanda was distant. Not in a way that screamed affair, but more in a way that suggested something was off. Her phone would ring late at night. At first, I thought it was work, the late-night shifts and calls. But then I started noticing how quickly she'd silence the phone when I entered the room. Little things. Her hesitation when I asked her where she'd been. She'd say things like, "Just out with the girls," but she never seemed to mention Jason by name, even though he was constantly at the office. I should have paid more attention, but I didn't. Life with Amanda had always been easy. Or so I thought. We had a good home, good careers. Well, at least mine was decent. Amanda's was thriving. She had a strong position in the company, and Jason was one of the rising stars in the department. I convinced myself that I was being paranoid. I had no reason to doubt her, right? But every day I spent with her, I felt a distance growing, a wall I couldn't break through. When I brought it up, cautiously, gently, she brushed it off. "It's just stress from work," she said, her voice too calm, too rehearsed. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But then came the business trip. The company retreat was a week-long affair, held at a luxury resort on the coast. Amanda and Jason were both attending, of course. I tried to dismiss the gnawing sensation in my gut, the sense that something was going to go horribly wrong. Maybe it was my growing unease with her late-night texts, her increased hours spent away from home. But I told myself, no. You're being irrational. This was a work trip. Nothing more. That first night, I had dinner with a few colleagues and tried to relax. I could see Amanda from across the room, laughing with Jason and another coworker. Jason's hand brushed her arm, too casually, too often for comfort. I tried to tell myself that it meant nothing. But as the night went on, and they left the table together to grab drinks at the bar, the knot in my stomach tightened. Later, as the evening wound down, I slipped away from the gathering and headed to the pool for some fresh air. I thought I'd find peace, but instead, I found my worst fear. There they were, not 5 feet away from me, their faces inches apart as Jason whispered something to her. Amanda laughed, and then the kiss. The next hour was a blur. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage as if I were the one who had just been caught. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't confront them, not yet. Part of me wanted to scream, to rush over and demand the truth, but I stayed there, immobilized by the overwhelming flood of emotions crashing over me. I watched them walk hand in hand back to their rooms, the weight of betrayal hanging in the air like thick smoke. Amanda had always been the calm one, the one I trusted with everything. But now, everything was shrouded in doubt. I wasn't just angry. I was flustered. I didn't know what to feel, what to do. Eventually, I forced myself to leave the pool area, retreating to our hotel room in a daze. Amanda had texted me earlier, asking if I was still out, and I had pretended everything was fine. I didn't know how to look her in the eye, how to face her now. I spent the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the resort outside. All I could hear was my own breathing, my own heartbeat, steady and calm, so unlike the storm inside me. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen, about what Amanda had done. The next morning, I watched her as she got ready. She was so normal, so Amanda. She kissed me goodbye before heading out to her meetings with Jason. I said nothing. Couldn't say anything. How could I? What was there to say? Would she admit it? Would she even care? The silence between us was unbearable. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, or perhaps, that I had already lost her. The realization didn't hit me all at once. It was gradual, a slow poison, creeping into my thoughts at all hours of the day. But last night, seeing her with Jason at the pool, seeing them kiss so easily, so casually, I knew. I knew without a doubt that whatever we had, whatever trust and love I thought we shared, was gone. I didn't sleep much. My mind raced, replaying the scene over and over, asking myself the same question. Why? What was it about him that made her betray me? Was it my fault? Had I not been enough for her? I didn't have answers, just an aching sense of betrayal that gnawed at me, relentless and suffocating. Amanda had left early that morning for her meetings, looking as calm and composed as ever. She kissed me goodbye like nothing had changed, like I hadn't seen her in the arms of another man only hours before. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to shout at her, demand the truth, but I didn't. I couldn't. I just nodded and watched her walk out the door, the click of her heels on the hotel floor echoing in my mind. I stayed in the room, trying to pretend that everything was normal, but I knew it wasn't. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen, about what she was doing with him behind my back. It was like a knot in my stomach, twisting tighter with each passing minute. I knew I couldn't just let this go. I had to know the truth. I had to find out what was really going on between them. That's when I made the decision. I'd go through her things. I didn't want to stoop to that level, but I couldn't just sit here, waiting for the truth to come to me. I had to take control. Her suitcase was neatly packed, just like everything else in her life. Amanda was always organized, always meticulous. Her clothes were folded, her shoes carefully arranged. But it was the small, hidden compartments of the suitcase that caught my attention. She had always been so careful, so private about her things, but there it was, an unspoken invitation. I opened the top compartment slowly, trying not to disturb anything, to leave no sign that I had been there. At first, all I found was a few pairs of shoes, some makeup bags, and a couple of toiletries. But then, tucked at the very bottom of the bag, I found something that made my blood run cold. A small black lace garment, something more intimate than what I had ever seen her wear. It wasn't something I had bought for her. She didn't wear this for me. My heart dropped. It was the kind of lingerie meant to be seen by someone else, someone other than her husband. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, trying to convince myself that it was just a fluke, that it didn't mean anything. But the reality of it hit me like a slap to the face. I pushed it aside, my hands trembling, and continued to dig deeper into the suitcase. There were other items that made my stomach churn: a small packet of contraceptives and a box of condoms. I froze, staring at the small, unassuming objects. They were so simple, so casual, but in that moment, they were everything. My mind spun. The contraceptives weren't just for casual protection. They were part of something much more calculated, much more intentional. She had planned this. She had planned to sleep with him. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. It was as if everything I had built with her had been nothing more than a fragile illusion. I couldn't think straight. My anger flared, hot and vicious, but I didn't act on it. Not yet. I wasn't going to confront her now, not with this in my hands. No, I needed to think. I needed to do something more. I stood there, holding the condoms, my mind working in overdrive. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without consequences. But I didn't want to just yell or demand answers. I needed her to feel the weight of what she was doing. I needed her to understand the magnitude of her actions. That's when the idea came to me, a dark and twisted thought, but one that seemed so fitting. If she was going to be reckless, if she was going to throw our life away, then I could at least give her a taste of the consequences. I took the contraceptives and carefully placed them in her toiletry bag, where she'd be sure to find them. I wasn't going to just leave them there. I was going to make sure she knew that I knew. I wanted her to feel the weight of my knowledge, the knowledge that I was watching, that I was waiting for her to make her next move. But that wasn't enough. I needed to plant something else, something that would make her feel vulnerable. It wasn't about revenge, it was about making her face the reality of what she was doing. If she was going to have an affair, if she was going to sleep with him without any regard for our marriage, then she needed to understand the consequences of her actions. I reached for the condoms and slipped them into the front pocket of her purse, where she'd definitely find them when she returned. The image of her discovering them, of her realizing that I knew, was a thought that kept me going. I wanted her to be caught in the moment of guilt, to know that there was no way out of this, that she couldn't hide from the truth anymore. And then, just to make sure, I left a small note hidden inside her wallet, where only she would find it. A single line, a simple question: is it worth it? I didn't know how she would react. Maybe she would be angry. Maybe she would deny everything. Maybe she'd even leave me. But I didn't care. At that point, I didn't care what happened. I needed to show her that I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. I wasn't going to be the husband who was blindly trusting, the one who didn't see the signs, who didn't acknowledge the betrayal right in front of him. I took a deep breath and stepped back from the suitcase, looking at everything one last time. My heart was racing, my hands still shaking, but there was a strange sense of calm settling over me. I had done it. I had planted the seeds of the truth. Now I would wait. She would have to face it eventually. The truth was unavoidable. And when she did, I would be ready. I sat there for a long time after I planted the condoms in her purse, staring at the empty hotel room. It felt strange, almost surreal, as though I had slipped into some other version of reality. A version where everything I knew about my wife, about our life together, had been shattered. The pieces were scattered everywhere, and I was just left standing amidst the wreckage, trying to put it all together. But I couldn't. The weight of everything was starting to sink in: Amanda's betrayal, the cruel realization that she had been with him. Jason. I kept seeing the way she kissed him by the pool, the way she let him touch her, the way she completely ignored me. Ignored me. That was what hurt the most. I wasn't a jealous man by nature. I never had been. But this wasn't about jealousy anymore. This was about betrayal. The kind that couldn't be fixed by words or excuses. The kind that cut deeper than anything I had ever known. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed more than just the evidence in her purse. I needed to see it, to have proof. To show her what she had done, to make her understand the weight of her actions. Words wouldn't be enough. I couldn't just confront her and expect her to admit everything. She would deny it, deflect, maybe even turn it back on me. I needed something concrete. Something undeniable. I stood up from the bed and walked to the window. The curtains were drawn, but there was a small crack in the fabric where the light from the hallway seeped through. My eyes scanned the room, looking for something, anything, that might help. And then it hit me. I could make a video. Not just any video, but one that would capture them in the act, a record of their betrayal. I knew I could use the curtain to my advantage. The way it was hung, the way it was pulled back just enough to give me a glimpse of the patio outside. If I moved it just right, I could get a shot of them without being seen. The thought of it made me sick to my stomach. But in that moment, the anger took over. I needed to see it again. I needed to prove it. And the idea of having that video, that tangible piece of evidence, gave me a sense of control, even if only for a moment. It would be my way of saying I knew. I wasn't blind. I moved to the curtains slowly, my fingers trembling as I touched the fabric. The curtains were thick, heavy, and I could feel the tension in the fibers as I pulled them apart just a little more. The slight noise they made was almost deafening in the silence of the room, but I couldn't stop now. My heart was pounding, my mind racing, but my body was already acting on its own, driven by some twisted need to see them again. I stepped back, standing to the side so I wouldn't be seen through the gap in the curtains. I wanted to be sure they wouldn't notice me, even if they were right there, only a few feet away. I pulled out my phone and turned on the camera, setting it to record, keeping it low in my hand, hidden in the folds of my pants. My breath was shallow as I waited. Minutes passed. Every second felt like an eternity. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, my stomach in knots as I kept my eyes fixed on the small gap between the curtains. The patio outside was quiet, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Amanda and Jason were bound to come out soon. The thought made my stomach churn. Finally, they appeared. I saw their silhouettes through the curtain, the way they moved toward the edge of the patio, and I knew instantly what was about to happen. Jason laughed softly at something Amanda said, and I could see her smile in return. It was the same smile she had given him the night before, the one that made my blood run cold. She leaned into him, brushing her lips against his, and that was it. They kissed again, deep and slow, as if no one was watching, as if there was nothing wrong with what they were doing. Jason's hands slid down her back, and Amanda wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. My heart raced, the intensity of the moment almost unbearable. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I knew this was wrong, that it wasn't right what I was doing, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop myself from watching, from capturing this moment. It was like a compulsion, something I couldn't shake off. It was my way of holding on to the truth, of making sure she couldn't hide from what she had done. The kiss lasted for what felt like forever. Each second felt like it was burning into my mind, each touch more intimate than the last. I zoomed in on them, just enough to catch the smallest details. The way their bodies pressed together, the way they moved in sync, lost in the moment. It wasn't just a kiss. It was everything. And then, as if the universe was giving me one last piece of cruel irony, the curtain shifted slightly. The fabric caught on the edge of the window frame, and the small rip I had caused when I pulled the curtain back earlier began to widen. It wasn't a huge tear, just a small opening, but it was enough to draw my attention. I froze, the camera still recording, my hand frozen in place. The sound of fabric tearing, the slight rustling noise, seemed deafening in the stillness of the room. I cursed under my breath, but it was too late. They had already noticed. Jason looked up, his eyes scanning the room, and for a brief moment, I thought he saw me. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I was paralyzed. Amanda glanced over at him, following his gaze, and I saw the faintest flicker of realization cross her face. She knew something was wrong. They didn't come inside, though. Instead, they pulled apart, both of them looking in the direction of the window. Jason whispered something to Amanda, and she nodded, as if understanding that someone might be watching. I felt a surge of panic. My heart was racing as I kept the camera steady, praying they wouldn't realize I was recording them. But they didn't. After a long pause, they both turned and walked back toward the hotel room, still holding hands. The moment was over. I couldn't believe it. I had the proof I needed, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt hollow, empty. I lowered the phone, staring at the screen as it continued to record. The video would show everything. It would show them kissing, touching, giving in to whatever desire had brought them together. But what did I do with that evidence? What would it change? I didn't know. I didn't know what to do with myself, with the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. I was left standing there, in the quiet aftermath of it all, unsure of what came next. But one thing was certain, Amanda couldn't deny it anymore. And neither could I. The video was everything. In those few seconds, I captured it all. The way Amanda kissed Jason, the way she clung to him like nothing mattered but him in that moment. I watched it over and over, my heart sinking lower each time. It was undeniable now. There was no more pretending, no more hiding behind the illusion that our marriage was fine, that we were fine. Watching her like that, knowing what she was doing to me, was the final nail in the coffin. When she came back to the hotel room hours later, she acted as if nothing had changed. She walked in like it was any other day, her smile wide, her eyes bright, as if everything was perfectly normal. She greeted me with a soft kiss on the cheek, and for a second, I almost felt like I was in some alternate reality. A reality where I hadn't just watched her fall into the arms of another man. A reality where I could still pretend that I didn't know what I knew. But I didn't return her smile. I didn't lean in for that kiss. I just stood there, my arms crossed, watching her like a stranger. The thought of touching her, of holding her the way I used to, felt revolting. The woman who had once been my world, my partner, was now just a painful reminder of everything that was wrong with my life. She didn't seem to notice at first. Or maybe she was too busy trying to keep up appearances. She unpacked her things, humming softly as she put her clothes away, talking about the meetings she had, about how everything had gone so well. But all I could think about was that video. I could see it in my mind every time she spoke, every time she moved. The way she had kissed him. The way she had given herself to him. I didn't respond to her small talk. I just nodded, offering the occasional "ahun" or "that's great" when needed, but I wasn't really listening. My mind was elsewhere, replaying what I had seen, what I had captured. The betrayal was so much clearer now. It wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't just about the lies. It was the complete destruction of the trust one had in her. She had given him something she had promised to give me. She had chosen him over me. I couldn't forgive that. The silence between us grew. She must have sensed something was off, but I wasn't about to reassure her. She was the one who had to live with this now, not me. She came up to me, placed a hand on my arm, and said something about being tired, wanting to go to bed early. I just nodded again, avoiding her gaze. I couldn't look at her without seeing Jason's face, without hearing their laughter by the pool, without imagining the way she had wrapped herself around him. When she tried to kiss me goodnight, I pulled away. The movement was instinctive, almost as if I had been touched by something unclean. She looked at me, confusion flashing in her eyes, but I didn't explain. I didn't owe her anything anymore. Instead, I turned off the light, rolled over, and pulled the covers up to my chin, making it clear that I wasn't interested in her closeness, in her touch. That night, sleep came in fits and starts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. I saw them kissing. It wasn't just an image. It was an imprint, burned into my mind. I couldn't shake it off, couldn't forget it. I kept replaying the video in my head, wishing I could just erase it from my memory. But I knew I never would. The next morning, I barely spoke to her. I didn't even look at her. Amanda tried to make small talk, but her voice sounded distant, as if I was already miles away from her. The gap between us was widening, and she couldn't see it. Or maybe she didn't want to. But I saw it. The woman who had once been my partner, my love, was now nothing more than a stranger to me. And I hated her for it. That afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to do something. I needed to take control of this situation, to stop pretending that I didn't know the truth. I wasn't going to live with this betrayal, with this disgust hanging over me. I found a lawyer. I didn't want to go through the process of a divorce, but I knew there was no other choice. My mind was already made up. I was done. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to explain, to apologize, to give me some half-assed excuse for why she had done this. There was nothing she could say that would make it okay. The lawyer's office was cold, sterile, the kind of place where people go to end things. To dissolve their lives, their marriages. I sat across from him, listening to him explain the process, how we would go about dividing everything, how we'd handle the property, the assets, the finances. But my mind wasn't on that. I wasn't concerned about the logistics of the divorce. I was focused on one thing: evidence. I had the video. The video was my leverage. It was everything I needed to make sure she couldn't get away with this. I couldn't let her walk away with nothing after what she had done to me. And as much as I hated to admit it, the video gave me power. It gave me control over the situation when I had none before. As soon as I left the lawyer's office, I went to the bank. I moved money, put aside savings that Amanda wouldn't be able to touch. I needed to protect myself. I had no idea what she would do once she found out, but I knew she wouldn't be happy. She would fight me. I had to be prepared. I didn't feel good about any of this. I didn't want to be this person, the man who was planning to leave his wife, the man who was secretly making preparations for a divorce. But I had to be. I had to protect myself. Because if I didn't, I'd lose everything. The worst part was knowing that Amanda wouldn't see it coming. She would have no idea that I had been making moves behind her back. She would think everything was fine until the moment I dropped the bomb. And when that moment came, I would be ready. I spent the next few days gathering everything I needed. The video, the bank statements, the divorce papers. Every piece of evidence I could find, I collected. I was building my case, making sure there was no way she could deny what she had done. And all the while, she acted as if nothing was wrong. She tried to get close, tried to talk to me like we were still the same couple we used to be. But I couldn't look at her without seeing what she had done. I couldn't touch her without feeling disgusted. She was a stranger now. And nothing would ever fix that. I was done. There was no going back. And when the time came, I would show her the evidence. I would show her that I knew everything, that I had seen everything, and that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The day I filed for divorce, everything felt surreal. It was as if I had been living in a fog for weeks, and now, suddenly, the fog had cleared, and I could see everything in sharp detail. The anger, the betrayal, the disgust, it all poured into this one moment. I had been planning for this, preparing for it, but nothing could have prepared me for how satisfying it would feel to finally take action. To take control of what was happening to my life. I had already arranged for everything: my lawyer, the papers, the video. I knew Amanda wouldn't expect it, that she'd think I was just going to let it go, that I'd somehow find it in me to forgive her. But I wasn't going to forgive. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. I had the power now, and I was going to use it. The day I had the papers ready, I went to her office. I wasn't going to do this at home, not after everything she'd done. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of having the upper hand in our private space. No, I wanted her to face this in front of her colleagues, in front of everyone who mattered to her. I waited for her to leave her meeting, standing outside her office, my heart pounding with anticipation. She had no idea what was coming. And neither did Jason. The video would make sure of that. When Amanda stepped out into the hallway, I handed the papers to her. She took them, looking at me with a smile, her expression almost blank, as if she thought it was just some routine legal matter. But when she glanced down at the papers, her smile faltered. It took a moment for the words to sink in, but when they did, I saw it, the recognition. She froze, her face draining of color. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't answer immediately. I just stood there, watching her, watching the reality settle in. This was it. Her world was about to collapse. Her eyes darted from the papers to me and back again, and I could see the panic starting to rise in her. But I wasn't done. I had prepared everything. The video of her and Jason. The one I'd recorded by the pool, the one that had burned itself into my mind, was attached to the lawsuit. It wasn't just a clip of them kissing or touching. It was everything, every intimate detail of their betrayal. I had ensured it was unedited, raw, undeniable. I had every right to make sure Jason paid for what he had done too, and I wasn't going to let him escape just because he was a colleague, just because Amanda had promised me she was faithful. I watched her face as she processed the news. Her eyes flickered with disbelief, then fear, then finally, anger. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. She was staring at the papers like they were some kind of foreign object. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook. "Take a look at the attachment," I said, voice cold. I saw her face freeze as she unlocked her phone and opened the video. The horror that flashed across her face was almost worth it. She couldn't stop watching. Jason's face, her own, every touch, every kiss, every moment of weakness laid bare for her to see. There was nowhere to hide now. A few moments passed in tense silence before she finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "You really did this? You're destroying everything we've built." "Everything you built," I corrected her, my voice low but firm. "You didn't build this with me. You built it with him. And you're going to pay for it." I saw the color drain from her face as she realized the extent of what was happening. Her betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was professional. It was going to cost her everything. She wasn't just facing a divorce. She was about to lose her career. I hadn't expected her reaction to be so raw, but it didn't matter. It was too late. In that moment, as I stood there watching Amanda crumble, a sense of power washed over me. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the man left in the dust. I had orchestrated this. I had made sure they couldn't escape the consequences. Jason, her lover, would find out soon enough, but I wasn't going to give him the courtesy of a private confrontation. No, I had already sent the video to his boss, to the HR department, to anyone who could make his life as miserable as he had made mine. Jason wouldn't just lose Amanda, he was going to lose his job. I made sure of it. His betrayal wasn't going to be swept under the rug. He wasn't going to walk away unscathed. It didn't take long. The next day, I got word from the company that Jason had been fired. It was swift and brutal. They couldn't ignore the evidence. No one could. He had been caught in the act, literally. I couldn't even begin to imagine what his boss must have thought after watching the video, after seeing him so unprofessional, so reckless. Jason didn't just cost me my marriage, he had cost himself everything. As for Amanda, the fallout was even worse. She wasn't fired immediately, but it was only a matter of time. The company couldn't afford the scandal, couldn't afford to have an employee's personal drama damage their reputation. I knew she'd be let go soon, and when she would have no one to turn to. Her affair had not only ruined our relationship but also her career. And that was just the beginning. It wasn't enough to take her money or make her feel guilty. No, I wanted her to feel everything I had felt. To lose everything the way I had. I wanted her to understand what it was like to be betrayed, to have your trust shattered so completely that you didn't know if you could ever trust anyone again. I wasn't going to let her walk away with anything. I wasn't going to let her think she could get off easy. I had already started moving money, consolidating our accounts, taking control of the property we owned. My lawyer had made sure to get me the best possible settlement, one that would leave me with the majority of our assets. There would be no alimony, no shared property. I wasn't going to let her walk away with a single cent more than she deserved. The divorce papers were signed. The settlement was reached. It wasn't a peaceful resolution. It wasn't a graceful ending. But it was fair. I was going to move on, and Amanda, for all her manipulations, was going to face the consequences of what she had done. By the time everything was finalized, I felt empty. No joy in the victory, no sense of triumph. There was just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that Amanda couldn't hide anymore. She couldn't pretend. Everything she had done had been laid bare, and now she would have to live with the consequences. I had taken everything from her, her reputation, her career, her marriage, and I wasn't sorry. I wasn't sorry at all. I had waited for weeks, dragging my feet, putting off what I knew was inevitable. But the paternity test was something I couldn't avoid any longer. It was a small thing, something that should have been insignificant given everything that had already transpired, but in the context of everything Amanda had done, it felt like the final piece of the puzzle. After everything, after the lies, after the affair, she had the audacity to tell me she was pregnant. I hadn't believed it from the start, not really. But I had to know. I had to make sure. So I had her take the test. And now I was waiting for the results. When the envelope came, it was like the world slowed down. I knew what I was going to see. In the back of my mind, I had always known. But when I opened it and saw the confirmation that the child wasn't mine, it hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I stared at the test results for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of it, trying to process what it meant. She had lied. She had lied about being pregnant with my child. She had used that to manipulate me, to keep me tethered to a marriage that had already been broken, to play the victim and try to win my sympathy. But now, there was no more room for her lies. The truth was out, and it hit harder than anything I had ever experienced. I had already lost everything, my trust, my love, my dignity, but this was different. This was the final blow. It was a reminder that everything she had said, every justification for her actions, was a lie. The child wasn't mine. The pregnancy wasn't mine to worry about. And all this time, while I had been planning my next move, she had been playing me, spinning me a story that wasn't even real. When I confronted her, I didn't give her a chance to explain. There was no point in hearing her excuses. She stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide, but I didn't care. The moment she opened her mouth to speak, I cut her off. The test came back, I said flatly, holding up the envelope, the results still in my hand. It's not mine. Her face shifted, first a flash of disbelief, then anger, before she quickly masked it with a forced calm. But I saw through it. I saw the guilt in her eyes, the way she struggled to keep her composure. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I thought maybe it was yours. But I didn't know. I didn't know for sure. I didn't let her finish. You didn't know? I repeated, the bitterness rising in my chest. You didn't know for sure? So you decided to lie to me, to manipulate me, to make me think that I was the one who was going to be a father? She stepped back as if the words physically stung her. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. There was nothing she could say. Nothing that could change what had already been done. Nothing that could erase the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. I want you to leave, I said coldly, the words coming out without emotion. I didn't feel the anger anymore, just the emptiness of knowing that this was it. I'm done with you. Her face crumpled, her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. I couldn't be. I had already given her everything, trust, love, loyalty, and she had taken it all and thrown it away. Amanda stood there for a long time, her gaze locked on mine, but she didn't speak. She didn't try to defend herself. Instead, she just turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, holding the test results in my hand, realizing that there was nothing left to hold on to. The emptiness inside me didn't go away. In fact, it deepened. For the first time in years, I felt completely alone. And yet, there was a strange sense of relief. The lies, the deceit, it was all over. She was gone. And while I couldn't erase the hurt, I could at least take solace in the fact that she had lost everything. I didn't care about the pregnancy anymore. I didn't care if she had been with Jason or anyone else. I had nothing left to give her. There was no more pretending. There was no more saving a marriage that had already died long before she told me about her so-called pregnancy. I had the divorce papers. I had the video. I had the evidence. I had everything I needed to move on. But the hardest part was knowing that I had trusted her with everything, and she had betrayed me with nothing but lies. The test results weren't just a confirmation of what I already knew, they were the final proof that there was no going back, no mending the broken trust. And that, more than anything else, was what hurt the most.